The Man Who Sailed into the Unknown. Chapter 1. A Dream of the Sea.
My name is William James Carter. I was born in Bristol, England, in a small house near the river. My father was a carpenter, and my mother was a kind woman who made the best bread in our street. I had one brother and two sisters. We were a happy family. We did not have much money, but we had enough. From a very young age, I had one dream. I wanted to sail the sea. I wanted to see distant lands and meet different people. Every evening, I went to the harbor and watched the ships. The sailors looked free and strong. I wanted to be like them. My father did not like this dream. One evening, he called me to his chair by the fire. "William," he said, "the sea is dangerous. Men die on the sea. Stay here, learn my trade, build furniture, build a good life." I listened to my father. He was a wise man, and I respected him, but I could not stop thinking about the sea. Every night I dreamed of waves and wind and faraway islands. When I was 19 years old, I met a sailor named Thomas Reed at the harbor. He had a weathered face and bright eyes. "We're sailing to Portugal next week," Thomas told me. "Come with us. See if the sea is for you." I thought for one night. Then I said yes. I did not tell my father. I left a short letter for my mother. I packed a small bag. On a cold Monday morning, I walked to the ship and never looked back. The first 2 days were wonderful. The sky was enormous. The water was every shade of blue. I felt completely free for the first time in my life. Then the storm came. It arrived at night without warning. The waves became mountains. The ship went up and crashed down again and again. I held on to a rope with both hands and closed my eyes and prayed. I was more frightened than I had ever been in my life. I thought about my father's words. I thought about my warm bed at home. By morning, the storm had passed. The sea was calm and silver. A sailor named George came to me and laughed. "That was nothing, a small wind. You should see a real storm." He gave me a cup of hot tea. I drank it and began to feel better. And slowly, as the sun rose over the water, I forgot my fear.
Chapter 2. Captured. We reached Portugal safely. I spent 2 weeks there and loved everything about it. The food was different. The language was beautiful even when I could not understand it. The people were warm and generous. On the way back to England, our ship was attacked. It happened very fast. Another ship came toward us. At first, we thought it was just passing. Then we saw the men on its deck. They were armed. They came alongside us and jumped onto our ship before we could do anything. They were pirates. They took everything. They took our cargo and our weapons and our money. Then they took us. I became a prisoner in a port city in North Africa. A hard man named Hassan bought me at a market. He put me to work in his house and in his garden. The work was exhausting. The sun was cruel. I slept on a thin mat on a stone floor. I had been free for such a short time. Now I was less free than I had ever been. But I did not give up hope. Every day I watched. I learned the routines of the house. I learned which guards slept in the afternoon. I learned which gate was sometimes left unlocked. I learned to be patient. After 2 years, my chance came. Hassan sent me and another prisoner named Ali to collect fish from the harbor. We had a small boat. The harbor guard was asleep under a tree. Without speaking, Ali and I looked at each other. He nodded once. We sailed away. We did not stop for 3 days. We ate the fish we had collected. We drank rainwater. We took turns sleeping. On the 4th day, we saw a large ship on the horizon. It was flying an English flag. I stood up in our small boat and waved my shirt above my head and shouted until my throat hurt. The ship saw us. It turned toward us. A rope ladder came down its side. I climbed up and collapsed on the deck and began to cry. I was not ashamed of it. Chapter 3. A New World. The English ship was going to South America. The captain was a decent man named Hargreaves who asked few questions and gave us food and dry clothes. We arrived in a Portuguese colony on the east coast of South America after 6 weeks at sea. The land was green and enormous. The air was warm and thick with the smell of flowers I had never seen before. Ali stayed in the port city. He had found work on another ship. We said goodbye at the dock. We shook hands for a long time. "Good luck, William," he said. "Good luck," I said. I never saw him again. I had very little money, but I worked hard. I helped a local farmer for several months. I learned some of the language. I was quick with languages. After a year, I could hold a conversation well enough. With my small savings, I bought a piece of land outside the town. The soil was red and rich. I planted sugarcane and vegetables. My farm was small, but it grew steadily. After 3 years, I had a good life. I was not rich, but I was independent. I had animals and food and a solid wooden house. I had neighbors who became friends. One of those friends had a daughter named Clara. Clara was quiet and thoughtful. She had dark eyes and a serious face that broke into a wonderful smile when something amused her. She came to my farm to help with the harvest one season. She was a better farmer than me. We talked every evening after work. We talked about everything: our families, our dreams, the strangeness of life, how it takes you places you never expected. A year later, we were married in a small church in the town. It was the happiest day of my life.
Chapter 4. The Storm That Changed Everything. Life was good. Clara and I worked hard and were happy. We planned for the future: a bigger house, more land, perhaps children. Then 3 of my friends came to my door one morning with a business idea. "William," said the eldest of them, a man called Rodrigo, "we are sailing to West Africa to trade. The profit will be enormous. Come with us. You know the sea. 6 months and you will come back a wealthy man." Clara did not want me to go. She stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed and looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. "You will come back?" she said. "In 6 months," I told her. "I promise." She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded once, the same way Ali had nodded in the harbor all those years ago. We left on the 1st day of August. The first week was perfect. The sea was calm, the sky was clear at night and full of stars. We made good progress south along the coast. Then the hurricane arrived. It lasted 2 days. When it finally ended, our ship was broken and lost. We did not know where we were. The captain thought we were near the northern coast of South America, but he was not certain. We tried to find a port. We sailed for another 2 days. Then a sailor in the front of the ship shouted a single word: "Rocks!" It was too late. The ship hit the rocks in the dark and broke apart immediately. I was thrown into the water. The water was warm, but the waves were enormous. I could see nothing. I could hear men shouting, and then I could not hear them any more. I swam. I did not know in which direction. I simply swam until I could not swim any more. My feet touched sand. I crawled onto a beach and lay face down in the wet sand and breathed and breathed and breathed. When I finally lifted my head and looked around, I saw no one.
Chapter 5. The Island. I was alone. I searched the beach for an hour, calling out names. Nobody answered. I found only a few pieces of broken wood from the ship and a single boot that did not belong to me. My friends were gone, all of them. I sat down on the sand and looked at the sea for a long time. Then I stood up. I had survived this far. I would not stop now. The wreck of our ship was visible a short distance from shore. It was sitting on the rocks, broken but not yet sunk. Over the next 3 days, I swam out to it many times. I made rafts from the ship's wood and brought back everything useful. Rope, tools, weapons, dried food, cloth, a small barrel of fresh water. I found a dog on the wreck. He was thin and frightened. I brought him to shore and fed him from my hand. He followed me everywhere after that. I named him Bristol, after my home city. I built a shelter against a large rock on the edge of the forest. I made a fence around it with sharpened wooden posts. I dug a small cave into the base of the rock for storage. The island was not small. It had forest and hills and 2 rivers with clean water. There were wild goats and many birds. There were turtles on the eastern beach. I was not going to starve, but I was terribly alone. I began to keep a record. I cut a mark into a flat stone each day. 7 marks in a row, then a gap, then another 7. I needed to feel that time was passing in an organized way, that I had not simply fallen out of the world. I thought about Clara constantly. I wondered if she knew what had happened. I wondered if she was waiting. I hoped she was not waiting. I hoped she was well and happy and living her life. I tried not to think about it too much. Chapter 6. Years on the Island. The first year was the hardest. I made mistakes constantly. My first attempt at making pots from clay produced nothing useful. My first attempt at growing vegetables failed completely. A family of wild pigs destroyed my fence twice. Bristol got bitten by something on his leg and was sick for 2 weeks, and I was more frightened those 2 weeks than during any storm at sea. But I learned. Slowly, with many failures, I learned. By the end of the 2nd year, my situation was much better. I had a strong house. I had a garden that produced vegetables and corn. I had built a larger enclosure and caught 4 young goats, which grew calm enough to eat from my hand and eventually provided me with milk. I made cheese. I made butter. I baked bread on flat stones heated in the fire. I made better tools. I made a cart from wood and 2 round pieces cut from a fallen tree. I made shelves inside my cave. I made a second smaller shelter near the fruit trees, which I used when I wanted to be somewhere different. I caught a parrot with a bright red chest. I spent months teaching him to say my name and a few other words. He was not good company exactly, but he was something. A voice, a living thing that responded to me. Bristol was better company. He was intelligent and loyal and slept at the foot of my bed every night and followed me on every walk around the island. I explored the island completely. I made a map. I named the hills and rivers and beaches. It helped to give things names. I tried not to count the years too carefully, but sometimes, at night, I did. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Chapter 7. The Fire on the Beach. It was during my 6th year on the island that everything changed. I was checking the eastern beach one morning when I saw the remains of a fire. Around the fire were things I did not want to look at directly. Evidence that people had been there, evidence of what they had done there. I went home and stayed inside for 3 days. I was not completely surprised. I had known there were other islands nearby. I had seen canoes in the distance on several occasions, but seeing the evidence of what had happened on my beach was different from knowing it was possible. I became much more careful. I stopped making fires during the day. I kept my weapons close at all times. I made 2 more hidden storage places in the forest in case I ever needed to leave my house quickly. 2 more years passed without any sign of visitors. Then one afternoon I was on the western beach when I saw canoes coming toward the island. I counted 8 men in 2 canoes. I ran to my hidden position in the rocks above the beach and watched through a gap. They came ashore. They made a fire. They were loud and seemed to be celebrating something. There were 2 other people in the canoes. They were bound with rope, prisoners. I watched and felt sick and tried to think clearly. The men were occupied. They were not looking at the forest. One of the prisoners was on the far side of the group, sitting on the sand, his hands tied in front of him. He looked up at the forest. I do not know if he saw me behind my rock, but he got to his feet slowly, took 3 quiet steps sideways, and then ran. He ran directly toward the forest, toward me. The men shouted. 2 of them stood up and gave chase. Chapter 8. Saturday. The running man was fast. His hands were still bound, but he ran with remarkable speed along the beach and into the edge of the forest. The 2 men chasing him were also fast. I had to make a decision immediately. I stepped out from behind my rock. The first man chasing the prisoner almost ran into me. He stopped, shocked. I knocked him down before he could shout. He did not get up. The second man stopped 10 paces away. He looked at me with wide eyes. He had a long knife. He raised it. I had a gun. He did not know what a gun was. He found out. The prisoner had stopped when he heard the sounds behind him. He turned slowly and looked at me. He was breathing very hard. His face was cut and dirty. He was shaking. I held up one hand, palm forward, the universal sign of peace. He stared at me for a long time. Then he came forward slowly, went down on one knee, and put his forehead to the ground. "No," I said, pulling him up by the arm. "Stand up. We are equal." I cut the ropes from his wrists. I showed him the direction of my house. We went quickly without looking back. By the time we reached the rock and the fence, the canoes had gone. I watched them from the top of the hill until they disappeared. Perhaps they thought the forest was full of enemies. Perhaps they simply did not care enough to pursue. I brought the man inside. I gave him food and water and a place to sleep. He slept for 14 hours without moving. When he woke, I showed him around and gave him simple words for things: water, food, tree, fire, house, yes, no, good. He was quick, much quicker than my parrot. I named him Saturday. It was a Saturday when I found him, so it seemed right. Saturday was perhaps 25 years old. He was strong and calm and observed everything with great intelligence. Within 6 months, he spoke well enough that we could talk about real things. We talked about our lives, about where he came from, about what had happened to him, about my years alone on the island, about Clara. "You love her," Saturday said, simply. "I do," I said. "Then we must find a way back," Saturday said. "That is the reason I am here." I had not thought of it that way before, but from that evening I began to think seriously about escape. Saturday helped me build a larger canoe than I had made before. He knew more about these things than I did. He showed me how to shape the wood and how to use the currents. It took us 4 months. On the morning we finished, I stood on the beach and looked at the canoe and then looked out at the sea. Bristol sat beside me. The parrot was on my shoulder. "Well," I said to Saturday. "Yes," he said. He was smiling. "Shall we go?" We left on a clear morning in the dry season, with enough food and water for 3 weeks, 2 guns, and a map I had drawn from memory of the coastline I had seen from the hill. On the 9th day, we saw a sail. It took an hour of shouting and waving before the ship changed direction and came toward us. When it was close enough, I could see the flag. English. I sat down in the bottom of the canoe and covered my face with my hands. Saturday put one hand on my shoulder and said nothing. He understood that some things do not need words. We climbed on board the ship. The captain was a quiet man from Devon who looked at us, two of us, dirty, thin, dressed in worn animal skins, and simply said, "Come inside. There is food." "Where are you going?" I asked the captain. "Back to England, via Brazil." Via Brazil. I looked at Saturday. He looked at me. "Brazil," I said. "Yes," Saturday said. "We go to Brazil first." The captain looked between us and asked no questions. He poured 3 cups of tea and set them on the table. I picked up the cup and held it with both hands and felt the warmth go through my palms. Outside the window, the sea moved under the sky the same way it always had, the same way it would always do long after all of us were gone. But for now, we were on it, and we were going home.